Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be introducing you to the concept of Noble Phantasm looping as a method of clearing content in Fate Grand Order. This is a style of gameplay that has become more relevant and viable ever since the release of Scatty, and will become substantially more so with the release of Castoria later this year. So I'm going to be introducing you to the concept so that you can start thinking about it in your head, start thinking about some of the servants who enable it, or who are capable of performing it, because it's not necessarily a new player-friendly method of playing this game, but if you get started now, you have time to prepare before the release of Artoria Castor later in the year. So, here we go. So I am quote-unquote cheating just a little bit here by making these teams in the quest that it's going to be easiest for me to succeed in, which is the QP dailies against casters. There's a mechanic in this game that different types of enemies will actually return different amounts of Noble Phantasm to you when you hit them. Casters are the most generous in that regard, so casters are the easiest enemies to loop against. So we're going to be using them for the purpose of this video, just so that I have the best chance of success, or of showing off the concept in a way that, succeeds for you guys who are watching. And we're going to be showing off two different kinds of Noble Phantasm looping teams. I don't have my own Scatty, so I'm only able to show Arts looping teams, but that's what Artoria Castor is going to be enabling anyways, so that's probably a better analogy anyhow. So we're going to be going through and showing two kinds of teams, and this first one is going to probably look more like what Artoria Castor is going to enable when she releases. So we'll go ahead and show that first. The typical thing that you want when you're looking for a servant who is capable of looping their Noble Phantasm is a servant with a AoE or multi-target Noble Phantasm that has a lot of hits and is types to either Arts or Quick, depending on if you're looping with Arts supports or with Scatty. So for the purpose of this video, we've chosen Mordred Rider. She has a AoE, multi-target, Arts Noble Phantasm that hits a bunch of times. She has pretty good Noble Phantasm gain stats, so she's a good candidate for this kind of thing. She also has class advantage against the casters that we're going to be fighting, so that's extra helpful. Although often when you're running these kinds of teams, especially when you're aided by Castoria, the class advantage system kind of gets thrown out the window, just because usually at the point that you're running two Artoria casters, your damage will be good enough that you don't need to worry about it too much. Anyways, so what we have to do here, because the supports that are currently available in the North America global server version of this game are not capable of doing everything that Castoria can, in that she can buff damage, charge Noble Phantasm, and buff Noble Phantasm gain. The supports that we have available right now can't do all of those things in one servant, so we have to account for that in a couple different ways, so I'll show you what's going on. So we're using a max limit broken kaleidoscope on Mordred, just because I have one of those and I can. She doesn't necessarily need it if you're using Mordred specifically, because she does actually have a way to charge her own Noble Phantasm, so a regular kaleidoscope would do just as well. We're also using Tamumo because she has two skills, one of which will increase Arts card effectiveness, and another one of which will increase Noble Phantasm damage. So she's the main support. The craft essence on her does not really matter. She's not going to factor into the battle at all in an offensive manner, just in a support manner. So you can borrow her from a support list, and whatever craft essence she has will not really come into effect. Unless she has like her Bond craft essence, which I think buffs party Arts damage, which would be really helpful. I don't have that one available though, so. The last member of our team is somebody that you all watching this can supply just very easily, which is Paracelsus. Now Paracelsus has two skills that are very helpful for any kind of Arts looping team, which are these two skills right here, both of which last for 3 turns. And again, you can see Arts card effectiveness, which is going to help Arts cards generate more Noble Phantasm, as well as buffing NP gain for one servant, so that's going to be really helpful as well. So the team is essentially set now. So coming into the level, what we do is we just use all of the available skills and make sure that anything that is targetable goes to our DPS servant. And then, once we're ready, we just use the Noble Phantasm, and if everything goes according to plan, she will hit the enemies and kill them quickly, and then go into overcharge, which doubles incoming NP gain, and get into overcharge very quickly into her NP, hopefully, and generate lots of Noble Phantasm for herself, and hopefully recharge herself fully. And you can see that she did. All of those same buffs that we just put on her are still active, so we can do it again, and ideally get the same result. And once again, it was a success. So we come into the final wave, where if we have any other buffs that we've been sitting on, we can use those, just because the final wave of most levels will be, beefier enemies. And we use the Noble Phantasm one last time, and then at the end of this one, all of the buffs that are on her will expire, so it's really important that you manage to clear the entire level in 3 turns. Because if not, then some of your buffs go away, and now you're just kind of playing this weird team that only has one damage dealer, usually one damage dealer who is not classed correctly to counterclass the enemies. So it's really important that you have enough damage through the leveling of skills, through the upgrading of Noble Phantasm, not only to loop the NP, but to deal enough damage to kill all the enemies very quickly. Okay, so in that team, we relied on just pure damage and strong amounts of NP gain to charge us back up all the way to 100% each time. I'm going to show you another type of team that also loops Noble Phantasms in the same kind of way, but doesn't assume as much incoming NP gain. And this team is actually even more whale-oriented than the one that I showed previously. And this team requires you to have at least 2 out of 3 of Tamama, Waver, or Scatty, and then you can borrow the 3rd one, whichever one you don't have. Waver and Scatty specifically are important because they're going to both have access to charging another servant by 50%. So that's what we're going to be relying on for this kind of team, is the fact that Chen Gong, who's our DPS for this team, is going to kill the enemies, and then he also kills the servant in the leftmost position, which will bring in Waver, who will then charge Chen Gong back up to 50. Hopefully Chen Gong gets at least 50% with every NP that he uses in his overkill, and in his during his Noble Phantasm when he kills the enemies, he gets himself to 50, kills the leftmost, frontmost servant, brings in the new support servant, in this case Waver, who charges him the other 50% of the way there. Chen Gong goes again, kills him, brings in Scatty, and the team works like that. So we start out much the same way. We're going to use all of the NP gain and arts damage buffs that we have available, and we're going to make sure that they all add to Chen Gong specifically. This one does require a max limit broken kaleidoscope, because Chen Gong does not have, well, he does actually, he can charge himself 10%, but there's no CE in the game that gives you 90%, so you need a fully max limit broken kaleidoscope to use his NP on turn 1, assuming you have the team set up in exactly the same way that I do. I suppose there are potentially other ways, maybe not though. Anyways, you can see that Chen Gong got himself up to 75, so we're going to use Waver's damage buff, and then his crit skill just for the Noble Phantasm charge, and that's all we need from Waver, so we're going to go ahead and go again. And you want to try to hold on to that Chen Gong 10% just in case. Just in case he comes up a little short. Can happen sometimes with tougher enemies. Waver is also using a Noble Phantasm, or a Craft Essence, that charges the NP gauge of his allies when he dies. There's a 3-star version of this called Battle of Camlin. I think that's a really good craft essence to pick up a couple copies of. Keep a couple of those max limit broken around. Mostly for use in gimmick teams much like this, but you never know when it's going to come in handy. Taunters can use that craft essence to great effect, especially in like solo teams, that kind of thing. Anyways, Scatty comes in. You can see we used her defense debuff, as well as the last attack buff that we were sitting on. And Chen Gong is now ready to go again. So this team works pretty well, and if you have access to all of the necessary pieces that it needs in order to function in this way, it can be quite effective. You can get surprisingly high damage per target numbers with a team like this, in spite of the fact that Chen Gong is a 1 or 2-star with level 1 skills. You can hit surprisingly hard. And you saw on that one that, unlike in the first team, we were not relying on class advantage to help us deal damage. So if you kind of take both of those teams and combine them, that's kind of what you'll be doing with Artoria Caster a lot of the time, is you'll be using non-class advantage servants, but you'll use them in such a way that they start out with she can charge 50% battery is what I'm trying to say here. My apologies. She can charge 50%, so you use your own Castoria and then a borrowed Castoria and then a DPS servant who is an AoE art servant with a Noble Phantasm that has a lot of hits. You will use both of the Castorias to buff them, the DPS servant that is, at the beginning of the battle. That will charge them to 100, and then also increase their damage quite a bit, and also increase their NP gain, their art's effectiveness, all the things that Castoria does in her skills. You can look those up. And then you will Noble Phantasm, and they will, like in the first team, ideally refund themselves all the way up to 100 without relying on any additional help, because Castoria has used all of her skills at the beginning of battle most of the time. And what you'll see a lot of players doing on double Castoria Noble Phantasm looping teams is using a craft essence like this that actually does not start you with any Noble Phantasm charge on your DPS servant, but does massively boost the amount of damage that they'll do. This is again important to kill the enemy quickly into the hit count and get into overkill as quickly as possible, so that NP gain from the rest of the Noble Phantasm hits are doubled for the DPS servant, so that helps them recharge. So servants who, just to run over the requirements one more time for loop-capable servants, you want servants who have big damage, area of effect, AoE, multi-target, however you want to classify that, Noble Phantasms that are arts or quick type, depending on if you're looping with Scatty or Castoria. I didn't do that in the right order. You know what I'm saying, though. And then skills in their own kit, preferably that will further buff their own damage, or further increase their own NP gain, that kind of thing. So Summer Musashi is a common choice, Da Vinci Rider common choice, Muramasa coming out New Year's next year. Big thumbs up to him for looping teams. These kinds of servants, go to the internet, look at different servants kits, find some servants who, if you're interested in the style of gameplay, who meet the requirements that I've laid out here. Work on getting a craft essence like this. This is the best one for this kind of thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Save up quartz for Artoria. That's Artoria Caster. If you are able to, on top of everything else that I'm talking about, if you're able to, in advance, gather the materials to get all 3 of her skills to level 10 as quickly as possible when she comes out, that's a good idea as well. And if none of this is appealing to you, that's totally fine. There is nothing wrong with just using, regular teams. Nothing wrong at all with using regular teams like this. Looping, Noble Phantasm looping is, like I said at the beginning, a style of gameplay that is very much so geared towards long-term players who have a lot of things at their disposal in terms of max limit broken craft essences that haven't been available for a long time, or, you know, very specifically built kinds of limited servants, preferably at high NP levels and max level skills all over the place. Like, it's not something that every player can do, and it's certainly not something that you can just decide one day, oh yeah, I'm just gonna start looping Noble Phantasms all the time. It's something that you need to plan in advance. It's something that you need to build large parts of your account around, in terms of what servants you're rolling for, in terms of what skills you're prioritizing, in terms of what craft essences you're employing. So it's not for everybody, and if it's not for you, that's totally fine. Everything in the game is still clearable, just completely normally, even into, you know, current day JP stuff. You don't have to loop at any point. It's just something to make things go faster, and it's an interesting style of gameplay for those who are interested and who are capable of employing it. So I hope this video helped you familiarize yourself with the concept a little bit, gave you some things to maybe think about, gave you some ideas about different things to try if you were interested. So for my usual send-off, here's my follow code. It will also be in the description if you like to copy and paste. You can use that code to follow my account and get access to use my servants during story quests. This is what that support list currently looks like, although it does change a fair bit. Also in the description is going to be my Discord username. You can get in contact with me if you'd like to discuss anything in a more private setting in the YouTube comment section. Although if you prefer the YouTube comment section as well, that's totally fine. I'm very responsive to comments that are left, and I really encourage you to do so. I literally go through FAQ threads that I find online to look for video topics, so if you are struggling with anything in this game, please do let me know. I am constantly running out of ideas for videos. That's the only reason, that's one of several reasons why I post so infrequently, is because I just don't know what you guys want me to talk about. My videos are geared towards, like, new players and free-to-play players, but I'm not and have never been a free-to-play player, and I haven't been a new player for, like, almost 4 years. So it's a perspective that I try to inhabit to give good advice, but some of the things that you guys are running into are things that I've, you know, potentially forgotten about by now. So by all means, please, if you're struggling with anything in this game, wondering how to do something, wondering anything at all, really, leave it in the comments, and I will do my best to figure it out, and I can either get back to you there or make a video. So I greatly appreciate it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, and I will catch you next time.